You are witnessing a 14-year-old girl being dragged out of the emperor's chambers. She cannot walk. 2 servants are pulling her by the arms. Her bare feet scrape across the marble floor. Her eyes are open, but there is no one inside anymore. 3 days ago, she was laughing in the room next to yours. This morning, they summoned her. Now she is something else, as if her soul has been pulled out and left behind. A servant notices you watching. She grabs your wrist and yanks you back into the room. Her voice is low and urgent. Do not look, never look, and when they come for you, do not resist. Rome. Year 39. AD. You are 14 years old. You have been locked inside a place called the Garden of Venus for 6 days, and you have just learned what happens to girls when their names are called. Your father says this is an honor. Your mother cried as you climbed into the carriage. Your neighbors watched with envy as you rode up the hill toward the palace. No one told you the truth. No one told you that the most powerful man in the world runs a system like a factory, recording the names of girls, their ages, their faces, and summoning them one by one. And when they return, they are never the same. This is the story of what Caligula did to the girls in his palace. And the most terrifying part is not what he did. It is that no one stopped him. Not the senators, not the guards, not even the parents who handed their daughters over at the door. Everyone knew, and everyone stayed silent. If this story moves you, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. It takes only a moment and it helps pull voices out of the silence. The night air over Rome was damp and unusually warm, the kind that pressed against the skin and refused to let go. Clouds hung low above the city, muffling the moon and turning the marble hills pale and indistinct. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, the streets were quiet, as if the city itself had learned to hold its breath. Inside the private compound known as the Garden of the Goddess, the air smelled of incense and wet stone, heavy enough to taste. Livia, 14 years old, woke to the sound of leather soles striking marble. She did not sit up at first. She had learned that lesson quickly. It was the 6th night since she had been brought here. The footsteps were not hurried. They never were. They moved at a steady pace, untroubled, familiar. The kind of sound a hallway remembers. The kind of sound that returns night after night, until the walls themselves expect it. Livia was small for her age, with dark hair cut unevenly by her mother, and hands still bearing faint calluses from household work. She lay still beneath silk sheets that felt too smooth to belong to her life. Her heart beat fast, but she did not move. Across the corridor, a door opened. The hinges did not creak. They had been oiled. 2 figures emerged into the lantern light, and between them was a girl being dragged from the room. The girl looked older than Livia, perhaps 16. Her arms hung loose at her sides, fingers slack, as if they no longer belonged to her. Her bare feet scraped against the marble floor, producing a dry, rhythmic sound that echoed softly down the hall. Drag, scrape, drag. The girl's eyes were open. They stared upward, unfocused, reflecting light without holding it. Whatever had once lived behind them was gone. Livia's breath caught in her throat. On the girl's wrist was a thin red thread, tied in a simple knot. It was not decorative. It was not explained. No one ever explained it. But everyone in the garden understood what it meant. She had been called. The sound was what broke Livia's control. Not a scream, not a cry, just the smallest involuntary breath drawn too sharply. It was enough. A hand seized her arm from behind. The woman who grabbed her was a palace servant, tall and rigid, with gray streaks already threading through her tightly bound hair. Her name was not offered. Servants here rarely shared names. Her face was stern but not cruel, lined by years of watching and saying nothing. She smelled of oil and incense. Inside, the servant whispered, pulling Livia backward into the room. The grip tightened until it hurt. The door closed quietly. "Do not look," the servant said, her voice low and urgent. "And when they come for you, do not fight." She released Livia's arm and left without another word. Livia stood frozen in the dark, her skin prickling where the woman's fingers had been. She waited until the footsteps faded, until the dragging sound disappeared down the corridor, until the silence returned. Only then did her knees give way. She sank onto the edge of the bed and pressed her knuckles into her mouth to keep from making a sound. 3 days ago, that girl had been laughing. Livia remembered it clearly. The laugh had floated through the corridor during daylight hours, light and almost normal. Someone had been telling a story. Someone else had laughed too loudly. For a moment, the garden had sounded like a place where girls lived, not waited. Now the corridor was empty again. Outside these walls, families slept believing their daughters were being honored. Mothers had braided hair and kissed foreheads. Fathers had spoken proudly of favor and fortune. Neighbors had watched the carriages climb toward the palace with envy in their eyes. No one told them the truth. No one told them that the garden erased time, that days were not counted, that letters never arrived and were never sent, that the thick scent of flowers was meant to blur thought, not comfort it, that silence here was not peace, but pressure. Livia had arrived believing the stories. She had told herself that fear was childish, that she was lucky, that this was temporary. Now she understood. They did not kill the girls in the garden. Killing would have been simple, clean, understandable. They did something else. They took what made a person and left the body behind to walk, to breathe, to return when summoned again. A living shell that no longer resisted, no longer questioned, no longer hoped. Livia curled inward, her fingers digging into her palm until she felt pain. She needed it. The pain reminded her she was still there. In the distance, Rome remained silent under the low clouds. The city slept. The palace did not. And somewhere within the garden of the goddess, a red thread had been loosened, its purpose fulfilled, waiting to be tied again. Morning arrived without sunlight. Livia knew it was morning only because the servants came. The lamps were extinguished, the curtains loosened slightly, just enough to let in a dull gray glow that flattened everything it touched. The air remained heavy with perfume, as if night had never truly left the garden. Livia washed her face in silence and dressed in the plain white tunic laid out for her. The fabric was clean, soft, and identical to the one she had worn the day before. She wondered how many girls had worn it before her, and how many would wear it after. She was led into a smaller courtyard where a handful of girls stood scattered, careful not to stand too close to one another. That was where she met them. Marcia was the first to speak. She was 16, tall and slender, with carefully braided hair and eyes that missed nothing. There was something guarded about her posture, as if she were constantly measuring the space around her. She had arrived a month earlier, long enough to learn which questions should never be asked. Tertia stood beside her, barely 13, small even for her age. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders, and she clutched her sleeves with nervous fingers. Her eyes darted from face to face, searching for something familiar that did not exist here. Livia introduced herself softly, her voice almost swallowed by the stone walls. They spoke quietly, barely moving their lips. Not because anyone had told them to, but because the garden had taught them caution. "It's not the nights that matter," Marcia said after a long pause. "It's the mornings after." She leaned closer, her voice dropping further. "That's when the names are decided." Livia felt her stomach tighten. Marcia glanced toward the colonnade before continuing. "I saw it once, through a gap in the curtains." She described it in fragments, as if the memory itself resisted being shaped into words. 2 imperial officials entered a chamber just beyond the women's wing. Middle-aged men in dark robes, faces expressionless, bearing the authority of seals pressed into wax. One carried a stack of tablets. The other carried nothing but a stylus. They did not rush. They read names aloud one by one. Ages followed. Sometimes a note was added, murmured too quietly to hear. Their eyes lifted only briefly, resting on each girl as if assessing livestock at market. Name read, name scratched into wax. Tablet closed. No emotion, no hesitation. They didn't argue, Marcia said. They didn't discuss. It was already decided. Livia imagined her own name carved into soft wax, the letters neat and permanent, waiting to be erased only when the tablet itself was destroyed. Tertia had been silent until then. My mother cried, she whispered suddenly. Both girls turned toward her. She cried when the carriage came, Tertia continued, her voice trembling. But she wiped her face before the neighbors could see. She told me to stand straight, to smile. Tertia wrapped her arms around herself, curling inward. She said it was an honor, she said, that I should be grateful. Her voice broke. I don't understand what honor is, Tertia whispered. Why does it weigh more than a life? No one answered. There was no answer that would not sound like a lie. As they stood there, Livia began to notice the pattern. Servants moved through the courtyard in deliberate paths. One carried linens, another carried food. A third paused to watch, her gaze lingering just long enough to count, to remember, to report. The garden did not feel chaotic. It felt organized. There were those who wrote, those who watched, those who delivered information to places the girls would never see. It was not madness. It was a system. And systems did not require cruelty from everyone, only obedience. Marcia touched Livia's sleeve briefly, a gesture that looked accidental but was not. There's a rule, she said. No one says it out loud, but everyone learns it. She hesitated, then finished. Don't get too close. Livia frowned. If you talk too much, Marcia went on. If you cry together, if you become difficult to separate, they move you. Different wings, different corridors, sometimes different buildings. And then? Livia asked. Marcia shook her head. You don't see them again. Tertia's breathing grew shallow. The courtyard bell rang, sharp and metallic. The girls flinched instinctively. Servants reappeared, guiding them back inside. The conversation ended as abruptly as it had begun, unfinished and unresolved, like everything else here. As Livia walked away, she glanced down at her wrist. There was no red thread there, not yet. But she could feel it anyway, invisible and waiting. That afternoon, Livia sat alone in her room, replaying every word. The wax tablets, the sealed names, the rule about closeness. She understood now why laughter disappeared so quickly here, why silence was safer than comfort, why fear was rationed and hope discouraged. Hope made people talk, talking made people visible, and visibility led to selection. When evening approached, the lamps were lit again, restoring the garden to its false twilight. Somewhere beyond the walls, Rome continued its rituals of normal life. Meals were eaten, stories were told. Children slept safely in their beds. Inside the garden, names waited on wax. Livia lay down, staring at the ceiling, repeating one thought over and over as if repetition could anchor it in place. If my name is written, let me remember who I was before the tablet closed. The garden learned Livia's routine faster than she did. On the 7th day, the servants no longer asked if she wanted anything. They simply placed choices in front of her, as if the act of choosing could disguise the fact that she had no real control. A tray arrived in the afternoon, with figs split open like small hearts. honey pooled in shallow bowls, and bread so soft it barely resisted her fingers. The smell was warm, comforting, and wrong in a way she could not name. Another servant drew a bath behind a curtain, steam rising with a scent of roses and something sharper beneath it, like crushed leaves. The water was the perfect temperature, neither hot nor cold, as if even discomfort had been banned. The girls were surrounded by beauty that did not belong to them. And that was the point. Livia sat at the edge of her bed and watched the light change. It never changed naturally here. It was controlled by shutters and lamps and schedules that were never explained. In her old home, morning meant work, and evening meant rest. In the garden, time was a performance staged for her senses. She thought of Marcia's words, the mornings after, the names decided. The thought tightened around her throat like a cord. That evening, she was brought to a narrow hall lined with mosaics. The images were delicate, full of vines and birds and women with serene faces. The walls seemed to whisper that this was a place of worship, of refinement, of sacred femininity. It was a lie told in marble. A new servant stood at the hall's entrance, watching the girls file past. She was young, perhaps 18, with a thin smile fixed in place and tired eyes that avoided meeting anyone's gaze. Her name, whispered by another servant, was Daria, and her hands moved quickly as if she feared being noticed for too long. Daria guided Livia back to her room, then paused, adjusting the folds of Livia's tunic with careful precision. "You must keep it clean," Daria said softly, not quite looking at her. "They notice everything." Livia stared at her. "Who notices?" Daria's smile did not change, but her fingers tightened on the fabric. "The ones who write," she said, "the ones who count." Then she was gone, the door closing quietly behind her. Livia stood alone again, feeling suddenly observed by the air itself. She began to understand the trap. If the place had been brutal on the surface, if it had been chains and cold stone and shouting, she might have anchored her fear to something visible. She might have screamed. She might have fought. She might have believed in her own instincts. But here, this silk made her doubt herself. The warm bath made her question whether she was overreacting. The sweetness of honey on her tongue made her wonder if she deserved this kindness, as if kindness could be earned by silence. It was not a prison that looked like a prison. It was a prison dressed as a gift. Late that night, when the lamps had been lowered, Livia heard footsteps again, not the heavy, confident steps of officials. These were softer, measured, deliberate. They moved along the corridor slowly, pausing at each door, as if tasting the silence behind it. Livia held her breath. The steps stopped outside her room. A pause, a faint scrape, as if a hand brushed the door frame. Then the steps continued. They stopped at the next door. Another pause. A key turned. Livia heard the door open. She heard a small sound that might have been a whimper, swallowed quickly, followed by the rustle of fabric and the soft murmur of a servant's voice. Not cruel, not gentle, simply efficient. Then the door closed again. Livia stayed rigid in her bed, her eyes wide in the dark. She did not move until the footsteps faded. The next morning, the girl from the next room did not appear in the courtyard. No one asked where she was. No one said her name. It was as if she had never existed. Later, as the day dragged forward in artificial light, Livia noticed something else. The servants watched. Not openly, not with obvious suspicion, but with the patience of people trained to observe without emotion. They carried trays and linens, but their eyes tracked tiny changes. A swollen eyelid, a trembling hand, a girl who ate too little, a girl who ate too much. Even silence was measured. Livia tested it without meaning to. She forced herself to eat, to drink, to smile faintly when Daria returned with fresh water. Daria smiled back, her expression identical each time, as if the smile itself had been assigned. When Livia's hands began to shake, she tucked them under her thighs to hide it. That evening, when she was alone, she approached the bronze mirror set into the wall. It was polished so carefully that it reflected her face with unforgiving clarity. She stared. The girl staring back looked like Livia, the same dark hair, the same slight frame, the same eyes. But something in the gaze was different. Her own eyes looked older than her face, not wiser, not stronger, just older, the way a tree looks older after lightning strikes it, even if it still stands. She raised a hand toward the mirror and watched the reflection match her. For a moment, she felt a strange distance, as if the girl in the bronze was someone she had known long ago and could not quite remember. A thought rose in her mind, sharp and cold. They do not begin by taking the body. They begin by taking the certainty that the body belongs to you. Livia pressed her forehead against the cool metal and closed her eyes. She tried to recall the sound of her mother's voice, the smell of her home, the weight of ordinary days. But the garden was already flooding the edges of those memories, coating them with incense and sweetness and silence. In that false paradise, Livia understood the first theft. Not flesh, not blood. The first theft was identity. And once they took that, the rest would come easily. The garden's kindness had edges. Livia felt them in the way servants smiled without warmth, in the way doors closed with the same soft finality every time, in the way silence followed her like a shadow that belonged to the building, not to her. After the girl in the next room vanished, the corridor seemed quieter, as if the garden had swallowed sound along with her. Livia tried to behave the way she thought the garden wanted. She ate what was placed in front of her. She washed when told. She kept her voice low and her face neutral. But inside, something kept turning. A question she did not dare to speak aloud. How do you survive a place that rewards you for pretending you are fine? That afternoon, Daria returned with fresh linens and a small bottle of oil for Livia's hair. Daria, the young servant with tired eyes and a practiced smile, moved quickly as always, never lingering. As she set the items down, her gaze flicked to Livia's wrist, then away. "Keep your sleeves down," Daria murmured, barely audible. Livia's pulse jumped. "Why?" Daria hesitated, the smile still fixed on her mouth like a mask. "Because someone might decide they like what they see," she said, "and they will write it." Before Livia could ask anything else, Daria slipped out. Livia stood alone with the bottle of oil in her hands, realizing that even her skin had become information. That was when she noticed something unusual. A small piece of cloth lay folded beneath the edge of the tray, half hidden under the fruit and bread. It was plain linen, the kind servants used for cleaning, but this piece was too carefully placed to be an accident. Livia picked it up slowly. 3 knots had been stitched into it with red thread, not decoration, not embroidery for beauty. 3 tight knots, close together, as if someone had tied them in a hurry, but with purpose. Livia's fingers trembled as she turned the cloth over. There was nothing else, no words, no name, just the red thread and the knots. A knock sounded at her door, soft and brief. Livia froze. The door opened without waiting for permission. An older servant stepped inside carrying a basin of water. She was in her late 40s or early 50s, with silver threaded through her dark hair and a face worn by careful restraint. Her posture was upright, disciplined, but her eyes held a quiet intensity, as if she had learned to look away only when necessary. Her name was Sabina. Livia had seen her once in the courtyard, moving among the girls with a steadiness that felt different from the others. Sabina did not smile much. When she did, it was small and fleeting, like a candle in wind. She set the basin down and glanced toward the hallway, checking that no one stood there. Then she looked at Livia's hands, at the cloth. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Sabina's voice, when it came, was a whisper shaped by years of caution. "Hide it," she said. Livia clutched the cloth to her chest. "You left this for me." Sabina's eyes softened, but only slightly. "Yes," Livia swallowed. "What does it mean?" Sabina moved closer, lowering her head as if the walls could read lips. "It means you're not alone," she said. "And it means you must learn to remember." Livia stared at her. "Remember what?" Sabina's gaze shifted to the door. She listened. The garden was always listening, and those who survived learned to listen back. When she seemed satisfied that no one was near, she spoke again. "I was here," Sabina said, "when I was young." The words landed in Livia's chest like a stone. Sabina's hands tightened around the basin's rim. The knuckles whitened. Her voice did not shake, but something in her eyes did. "I came as a girl," she continued. "I left as someone else, and I learned a truth that kept me alive." Livia felt her throat go dry. "You fought?" Sabina gave a slow, almost bitter shake of her head. "No," she said, "not like you imagine. Fighting makes noise. Noise gets you erased." She took a breath, careful and measured. "I survived because I learned to keep my mind intact," she whispered. "They try to take it first. They drown you in comfort and uncertainty until you stop trusting what you feel. When that happens, you become easy." Livia thought of the honey, the warm bath, the soft beds, the false paradise. Sabina's eyes flicked to the perfume bottle on the table. "They love scent," Sabina said. "It is their favorite weapon." Livia frowned. "Weapon?" Sabina's mouth tightened. "There are rules here that are never written," she said. "If a girl cries too loudly, if she panics, if she shakes so much they cannot make her presentable, they punish her without bruises." Livia's skin prickled. "They do it with sweetness," Sabina went on. "They wash you again and again. They drown you in stronger oils. They make the air thicker until your own breath feels foreign. They tell you it is for your comfort." Sabina's voice lowered further. "It is to cover fear," she said, "to paint over cracks." Livia's eyes stung. Sabina glanced down at Livia's wrist, bare and unmarked. "No thread yet," Sabina murmured, almost to herself. Then she did something unexpected. She set the basin aside and sank to her knees in front of Livia. The motion was not dramatic. It was quiet, deliberate, as if Sabina had decided this long ago and had been waiting for the right moment. Livia gasped softly. "Please, you do not have to." Sabina reached out and took Livia's wrist gently, as if handling something fragile. Her touch was careful, steady, unmistakably human. "Listen to me," Sabina whispered. Livia could not look away. "If you survive," Sabina said, "do not let them erase us. Do not let us become numbers that vanish when the tablet closes." Her eyes shone, not with tears spilling, but with tears held back by discipline. "We were here," Sabina continued. "We had names, we had mothers, we had dreams, and they will try to turn all of that into silence." Livia's breath broke. Tears rose too fast, too hot. She pressed the cloth with the 3 knots to her mouth, trying to hold in the sound. Sabina's thumb brushed the inside of Livia's wrist, where a pulse beat too quickly. "Remember," Sabina said, softer now. "Even if you cannot speak, remember." For the first time since arriving at the garden, Livia felt something other than fear. She felt seen, and that recognition, simple and unbearable, made her cry the way she had been refusing to cry. Quietly, into linen, into red thread. Sabina rose, smoothing her skirt, her face returning to its controlled calm. Before she left, she looked back once. "Keep your sleeves down," she said, echoing Daria's warning, but with a different weight. And keep your mind awake. The door closed. Livia stood trembling with the cloth in her hands. 3 knots of red thread. A message without words. A small defiance hidden in plain sight. Livia did not sleep. She lay beneath the silk and listened to the garden breathe. A slow rhythm of distant footsteps and whispered doors. Sabina's warning stayed pressed against her ribs like a hand. Keep your mind awake. The cloth with 3 red knots was hidden beneath the mattress, tucked into a seam where the stuffing had begun to loosen. Livia had traced the knots in the dark until her fingertips ached, as if the thread could anchor her to herself. At some point, the lamps dimmed. The air thickened with perfume. The garden shifted into its other mode, the one that belonged to night. A soft knock came at her door. Not loud, not urgent, polite, as if someone were asking to borrow sugar from a neighbor. Livia sat up slowly, already cold. The door opened. 2 servants entered. Both women were dressed in the same pale robes, their hair bound tight, their faces blank with practiced neutrality. One was short and broad-shouldered, her expression stern. The other was taller, her eyes lowered, her mouth set in a line that suggested she had learned to swallow thoughts whole. Neither gave a name. "Come," the broad-shouldered servant said. Livia stood. Her legs felt distant, as if they belonged to someone else. She reached automatically for her sleeves, pulling them down to cover her wrists, remembering Daria's warning, remembering Sabina's eyes. The taller servant lifted a lantern, and the 3 of them stepped into the corridor. The hallway was brighter than Livia expected, lit by lamps that made the marble gleam. The stone was so polished it reflected their feet, turning them into dark shapes sliding across pale ground. They walked in silence. A turn. Another turn. The garden was designed to confuse. Corridors curved softly and returned to themselves. Doors looked identical. Time dissolved in repetition. Livia tried to count the steps. She lost count quickly. Then she saw Sabina. The older servant stood at the edge of an intersecting corridor, holding a folded cloth as if she had been sent there for ordinary work. Her face was calm, but her eyes met Livia's for the briefest moment. In that moment, Livia understood that Sabina had been waiting. As Livia passed, Sabina's hand reached out with the speed of someone who had practiced this in her mind 1,000 times. Her fingers brushed Livia's wrist beneath the sleeve. Something tightened there. Livia felt it before she saw it. A thin red thread, 1 knot. And then, slightly apart from it, a second knot smaller than the first. A mark within a mark. Sabina did not speak. She did not look back. But the message was clear, pressed into Livia's skin like a pulse. "Come back." Livia kept walking. The servants led her through a final doorway into a waiting chamber. The air inside was colder, scented differently. Less floral. More resin, like burned pine. The room held a low couch, a bronze basin, a curtain that concealed the far side. A young male attendant stood near the wall, head bowed, hands folded. He looked no older than 17, with a slim build and a bruised exhaustion around his eyes, as if he had learned too early that he was invisible. His name was Felix, murmured once by a servant when she thought no one listened. Felix did not look at Livia. He did not speak. He held a tray of water and cloth as if he were part of the furniture. One of the women adjusted Livia's hair, smoothing it, arranging it with careful hands. The touch was not gentle or rough. It was functional. The other checked her tunic, pulling the fabric straight, removing an imagined crease. They were preparing her the way one prepares an object for display. Livia's mind floated above her body, watching. This is what they do, she thought. They turned terror into routine. No one raised their voice. No one threatened her. No one needed to. The system did the threatening for them. The broad-shouldered servant spoke again, still without emotion. "Wait." Then both women left. Livia stood alone with Felix in the corner, the curtain still closed. Minutes passed. Maybe more. The garden did not permit her to know. The scent of resin grew stronger. It was mixed with another smell now, warmer, faintly sweet, like wine spilled on stone. Livia's stomach turned. Felix shifted his weight, almost imperceptibly. His eyes flicked toward her wrist, then away, as if even noticing was dangerous. Livia swallowed, her throat dry. "How many?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Felix's jaw tightened. He did not answer. He looked at the floor. That silence was an answer. Footsteps approached on the other side of the curtain. The fabric moved slightly, as if someone had brushed it while passing. Livia's heart hammered. The curtain was drawn back. She saw only a glimpse beyond. An inner chamber with heavy drapes, marble columns, and a table bearing a tall perfume vessel that glinted like gold. Everything was beautiful in the way a blade could be beautiful. Cold, exact, made to last. A voice came from within, calm and conversational, as if inviting her to a private honor. "Come closer." Livia's body moved before her mind agreed. She stepped forward. The world narrowed to details. The chill of the marble under her feet, the weight of her sleeves, the red thread on her wrist, hidden but burning in her awareness. The second knot felt like a tiny promise that might break. Livia tried to hold on to herself. She remembered Sabina on her knees. "We had names?" She remembered Marcia's eyes. They write everything. She remembered Tercia's trembling voice. Honor is heavier than life. The chamber beyond the curtain was full of light and scent and silence. Livia could feel her mind slipping, searching for a place to hide. She wanted to scream, but the garden had taught her that screaming was useless here. Screaming was a language no one was allowed to understand. The door closed behind her. The night disappeared. When she returned, she did not know how much time had passed. The corridor looked the same. The lamps had not changed. The marble still gleamed. Two servants guided her back the way she had come, their hands steady, their faces unreadable. Livia walked without weight, her feet moving as if obeying an order written directly into her bones. At her door, one servant smoothed her sleeve. The red thread was still there. The smaller knot remained. "Come back," it said. But Livia was not sure who was supposed to come back. Inside the room, Marcia was waiting. She must have slipped in while the servants were distracted, risking punishment for the sake of witnessing. Marcia, 16, tall and watchful, stood close enough to catch Livia if she fell. Livia did not fall. She did not cry. She did not even tremble. She looked at Marcia as if looking through water. "I am still breathing," Livia said, her voice flat with surprise, like someone noticing an odd fact. "But I do not know who I am." Marcia stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her. The embrace should have meant warmth. It should have meant relief. It should have meant return. Livia felt nothing. Her body accepted the contact. Her mind did not recognize it. The garden had taken something that could not be bandaged. And in the place where her sense of self had been, there was only quiet. Livia stopped trying to measure time. After the night her name was called, hours moved like water in a sealed jar, sloshing without direction. She ate when food arrived. She slept when exhaustion won. She spoke only when spoken to. The red thread remained on her wrist, hidden beneath her sleeve. The smaller knot pressed lightly against her skin, as if it could remind her of something she no longer knew how to feel. Marcia visited her when she could. Marcia, 16, tall and watchful, had the kind of presence that made the room feel less empty. She did not ask Livia to explain what had happened. She did not demand tears. She simply sat and watched Livia's face as if searching for the girl she had met in the courtyard. One morning, Marcia did not come. At midday, the courtyard filled with a restless quiet. Servants moved faster than usual, their steps brisk, their smiles thinner. The garden did not announce its intentions, but it always prepared. Daria appeared at Livia's door with a folded tunic, finer than the usual plain white. The fabric was pale, almost luminous, stitched at the collar with a subtle pattern of leaves. Daria, the young servant with tired eyes and a fixed smile, avoided looking at Livia's face. "This is not for you," Daria said, almost apologetic. "It is for Marcia." Livia's throat tightened. "Where is she?" Daria's fingers hesitated on the fabric. "Borrowed," she whispered. The word sounded harmless, like a book taken from a shelf, like a bowl lent to a neighbor. Then Daria was gone, leaving the tunic behind, as if the cloth itself could answer questions. Livia waited until evening to see Marcia again. When Marcia returned, she moved like someone who had learned to carry pain without spilling it. Her hair was arranged more carefully than usual. Her tunic was the new one, the pale fabric catching lamplight in a way that made her look like a figure in a mural. Her mouth held a smile. It was not a real smile. It was a mask placed on a face that had forgotten how to be relaxed. Marcia closed the door behind her and leaned against it for a moment, as if her legs were deciding whether they still worked. Livia rose slowly from the bed, uncertain what words belonged in her mouth. Marcia spoke first. "They sat in marble halls," she said, her voice steady but thin. "Men who command armies. Men who own land the way other people own sandals." She walked to the low table as if she were still serving, then stopped, her hands hovering above it, unsure what to do. "They poured wine like it was water," she continued. "They recited poetry. They laughed at jokes about the gods, about fate, about how fragile life is." Her eyes flicked toward Livia, and the smile on her mouth remained in place as if glued. "The whole time," Marcia said softly, "the truth was behind a door." Livia felt a cold bloom in her chest. She understood without needing details. Marcia exhaled, then added, "It is not only the garden, it is the city. It is the empire. The garden is just where they keep the girls. The rest of Rome keeps the silence." Livia sat back down, her hands limp in her lap. The words should have shocked her. Instead, they landed with a dull inevitability, like rain on stone. Marcia stepped closer, lowering her voice. "There was a man there," she said. Livia looked up. "A senator," Marcia went on. "Not old, not young. His beard was neatly trimmed. His hands were clean, the way hands are clean when they are not used for work." "His name," Marcia said, "was Lucius Ahenobarbus, and he wore a ring set with a dark stone." A senator, she explained simply, was a powerful man who sat near the center of Rome's decision-making, trained to speak in public and remain calm in private. "He watched me," Marcia said. "Not the way men usually watch, not hungry, not proud, just awake." She swallowed. "For a moment," she whispered, "I thought he would stand up." Marcia's smile twitched, almost breaking. "I thought he would say something, anything, even a single word." Livia waited, her breath shallow, Marcia's eyes lowered. "He did not." "What did he do?" Livia asked, surprised by her own voice. Marcia's hands clenched. "He looked at the floor," she said, "like a man praying. Then he lifted his cup and drank." The room felt smaller. Marcia leaned closer as if speaking the next words would summon something dangerous. "It was a performance," she said. "A stage. The emperor is the audience and the judge. Everyone else is an actor." Livia thought of Sabina's phrase, "Silence is currency." Marcia nodded as if hearing Livia's thoughts. "If you refuse," she said, "you insult. If you protest, you accuse. If you accuse, you die. She touched her own collar lightly, where the leaf pattern rested against her throat. So they smile, she said. They talk about poetry. They pretend the world is normal, because pretending is safer than truth. A faint sound came from the corridor. A servant passing, nothing more. Both girls fell silent instantly. Only when the footsteps faded did Marcia speak again, barely audible. I saw other girls, she said. Not from the garden. Some were wives of those men. Some were guests. They laughed too loudly. They held their cups with steady hands. They were beautiful in the way people become beautiful when they are terrified of looking afraid. Marcia's fingers rose to her mouth, then dropped. I wanted to tell them, she whispered. I wanted to say, do not smile. Do not play along. Do not make it easy. Her voice tightened, but I did not, because I would not survive the night. Livia stared at Marcia's mouth, still holding its false curve. Why did he look away? Livia asked, though she already knew. Marcia's smile finally cracked. She bit her lip hard, and a thin line of blood appeared, bright against her skin. Not because he was evil, she said, her voice shaking for the first time. Because everyone is afraid. The words hung in the air like smoke. Livia lifted her sleeve slightly and looked at the red thread on her wrist. The smaller knot touched her skin. Come back. She wondered what return meant in a world that trained entire rooms to look away. Marcia reached for Livia then, hesitant. Not an embrace, not yet. Just a hand placed on Livia's shoulder, light as a question. Livia did not feel warmth, but she did feel the weight of contact, the fact of another person insisting she existed. For a moment, that was enough to keep her from drifting completely away. The garden did not know how to hide fear. It had hidden so many things so well. Cries swallowed by perfume, footsteps softened by rugs, names sealed into wax. But fear was different. Fear leaked through seams. It changed the way people moved, the way they breathed, the way they tried to smile. On the morning after Marcia's return from the banquet, the servants began to run. Not openly at first, not with panic, just faster than usual. Trays carried with sharper steps, doors opened and closed, without the careful slowness that had always made the garden feel untouchable. Daria passed Livia's doorway twice within a short time, her face paler than usual, her fixed smile slipping at the corners. Livia watched from the threshold of her room, her hands folded in front of her as if she were a guest, not a prisoner. Marcia appeared beside her, silent. The corridor smelled stronger than normal, as if someone had poured perfume into the air to drown something else. Blood, Livia thought, and the idea startled her. She had never smelled blood here, not because it was absent, but because the garden did not allow it to be noticed. A servant whispered to another near the colonnade. The words were too quiet to hear, but the shape of the rumor traveled faster than speech. Something had happened beneath the theater. A narrow underground corridor. Metal, shouting, then silence. At midday, Sabina came to Livia's room without a basin, without linens, without any excuse that could pass for ordinary work. Sabina, the older servant with silver threaded through her hair and eyes that remembered too much, shut the door behind her and placed a finger to her lips. Do not ask questions in the courtyard, she whispered. Livia's throat tightened. What is happening? Sabina's gaze flicked to the window, as if checking that even the light could not listen. The machine is shaking, Sabina said. Marcia's posture stiffened. What does that mean? Sabina spoke slowly, choosing words the way one chooses a path through broken glass. It means the men who carry swords have stopped laughing, she said. It means a voice was mocked once too many times. It means someone close enough to the emperor to touch him has decided that fear is no longer worth it. Livia's stomach turned. Sabina's hand lifted, then lowered, as if she was restraining the urge to reach for Livia's wrist. The red thread was hidden under fabric, but Sabina seemed to feel its presence anyway. "When the machine shakes," Sabina whispered, "you hide the truth for tomorrow." Livia frowned. "Hide it how?" Sabina looked at her sharply. "In your memory," she said. "In cloth, in the seams of your life, wherever they cannot burn it." The words were strange, but their meaning was clear. Sabina was thinking beyond the garden, beyond this week, beyond survival measured in hours. She was thinking of the day after. Sabina moved toward the door, then paused. "Whatever you hear," she said, "do not repeat it. The garden punishes loose tongues more than loud cries." Then she left as quickly as she had come. That evening the lamps were lit early. The air was suffocating with scent, stronger than any night before. It was as if the garden were trying to erase reality by force, flooding every breath with sweetness until nothing else could be recognized. Livia sat with Marcia and Tertia in the corner of the courtyard where shadows gathered. Tertia had been quieter lately. 13 years old, too young to carry this kind of knowledge. She had begun to hold herself as if her bones were trying to disappear. Her hands fidgeted constantly, twisting her sleeves, touching her throat, checking that she was still there. Tonight, she could not stop shaking. "I heard them," Tertia whispered. Livia leaned closer. "Who?" "The servants," Tertia said, her voice breaking. "They said there was blood under the theater. They said someone screamed. They said the Emperor's guards were involved." Marcia's face tightened. "Stop," she murmured. "Not here." But Tertia was past caution. Her fear had outgrown the rules. "They will kill us," Tertia whispered, tears spilling now. "If they are angry, if they are frightened, they will erase us so no one knows. Like the girl next door, like she never existed." Livia felt something move inside her, something that had been still since the night her name was called. A reflex, a spark. Not hope, responsibility. She reached for Tertia's hands and held them firmly. Tertia's fingers were cold and damp with sweat. "Listen to me," Livia said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. It sounded like someone else speaking through her, someone older, someone harder. Tertia looked up, her eyes wide and wet. "I cannot promise you that nothing will happen," Livia whispered. "I cannot promise you that the garden will suddenly become kind." Tertia's mouth trembled. Livia tightened her grip, anchoring the girl to the moment. "But I can promise you something else," Livia said. Marcia watched, silent, her eyes sharp. Livia drew Tertia closer and pressed her forehead to the girl's hair, breathing in the scent of soap and fear. "I promise I will bring you home," Livia whispered. The words came out before Livia could think about whether they were possible. They were not a plan, not yet. They were a decision. Tertia's body shook with sobs, but she nodded against Livia's shoulder as if the promise was a rope thrown into dark water. In the corridor beyond the courtyard, a sudden metallic sound rang out. Not footsteps, not keys. A sharp clang, like a blade striking stone. The girls flinched as one. The garden had always been quiet. Quiet was its power. Metal was the sound of order breaking. Marcia's hand found Livia's sleeve, her fingers brushing the fabric where the red thread lay hidden. "Do you feel that?" Marcia whispered. Livia did. Not in her skin, but in the air. Something had shifted. The system that had moved so smoothly, so confidently, so endlessly, was stumbling for the first time. Somewhere beneath the theater, a narrow corridor was stained, and the stain could not be covered by perfume. Livia held Tertia tighter and stared into the darkness beyond the colonnade. If the machine was shaking, tomorrow might come. And if tomorrow came, Livia would have to become someone who could survive it. The morning the garden opened, the air felt wrong. Not sweeter, not heavier, not carefully arranged, just wrong, like a room after a fever breaks, when the body is still weak but the danger has moved on. The lamps were extinguished. The curtains were drawn wider than usual. Pale light fell into the corridors, revealing details the garden normally hid in soft shadow. Tiny chips in marble, faint stains near doorways, scuff marks from hurried feet. Servants moved with hurried purpose, no longer pretending that time was gentle. Livia woke to the sound of keys. Real keys, not the quiet clicks of private doors, but a ring of metal striking metal, loud enough to be heard even through thick stone. The sound carried a message the garden had never allowed before. Something has changed. A servant entered, the broad-shouldered woman from the night Livia was called. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes kept darting to the corridor as if she feared being watched from both ends. "Dress," she said. Livia sat up, pulling her sleeves down automatically. The red thread still circled her wrist. The smaller knot rested against her pulse. She did not remove it. She could not. Outside her door, other doors were opening. Girls stepped into the corridor wearing white, their faces pale and blank. Not from calm, but from disbelief. Marcia appeared, 16 and watchful, her mask of composure cracked by exhaustion. She met Livia's eyes and said nothing, but the way she held herself suggested she was bracing for either salvation or punishment. Tertia stumbled out of her room as if she had forgotten how walking worked. 13, small and frightened, she searched the hallway until she saw Livia, then rushed to her without thinking about rules. Livia caught her by the shoulders, steadying her. "We are leaving," a servant said, as if announcing a change in schedule. No explanation, no apology, no acknowledgement of anything that had happened. The girls were led through corridors they had never been allowed to see in daylight. They passed a storage room where bundles of fabric were stacked like supplies. They passed a chamber where a clerk stood at a desk, his stylus poised over a wax tablet. The clerk was a thin man with ink-stained fingers and nervous eyes. His name was Gaius, spoken by a servant in the tone one might use for furniture. He did not look at the girls, he only wrote. Livia caught sight of the tablet as they passed. Names, ages, marks. Then Gaius pressed a seal into warm wax and closed the tablet as if closing a ledger. The garden's final act was paperwork. Outside carriages waited. The sight of the open sky struck Livia like a blow. Rome was still there. The city's rooftops, the distant columns, the pale line of the river. Life continuing as if nothing had happened inside those walls. The girls were handed small bundles, gold coins wrapped in cloth, silk folded neatly, jewels that caught the light. Gifts, not to honor them, not to comfort them, to purchase their silence. Livia understood without being told. A contract without words. Forget. Marcia accepted her bundle with a face as still as stone. Her fingers did not tremble, but Livia saw the way her jaw clenched, the way her eyes hardened, as if she were swallowing something sharp. Tertia stared at her bundle as if it were poison. She looked up at Livia, panicked. "What do we do?" she whispered. Livia did not know. The carriage ride back down the hill felt unreal. The wheels rattled over stone. The streets widened. Familiar sounds returned. Vendors calling, sandals striking pavement, distant laughter. Rome was loud again. And the loudness made the garden feel like a nightmare no one would believe. At the edge of her neighborhood, Livia saw people waiting. Neighbors stood with expectant faces, eager to see what favor looked like up close. Then she saw her mother. Her mother, Aurelia, was a woman in her 30s with tired hands and eyes that had learned to hide grief behind duty. She stood very straight. Her hair was pinned neatly. Her lips held a smile that did not reach her eyes. When the carriage stopped, Aurelia stepped forward and embraced Livia. The embrace was careful, controlled, as if Aurelia feared that squeezing too tightly might break something that could not be repaired. "Blessed," a neighbor murmured. "Favored," another whispered. Aurelia nodded politely, playing the role required of her. But when she pulled back and looked at Livia's face, her eyes shifted. A storm moved there, deep and furious, held perfectly still. Livia returned to her home, to her familiar bed, to the scent of old wood and cooking smoke. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt like a stranger in her own life. That night, Aurelia placed the bundle of gold and silk on the table and stared at it for a long time. Then she turned to Livia and spoke softly, the way one speaks in a house where walls might have ears. "We will not talk about it," Aurelia said. "It was not cruelty. It was survival." In Rome, shame could ruin a family more thoroughly than death. The world forgave grief. It did not forgive dishonor. Livia nodded. She did not have the language to protest. Days passed. Weeks. Livia moved through life like someone wearing a borrowed body. She flinched at footsteps. She woke in the night, tasting perfume that was not there. Marcia disappeared from her sight. Tertia did too. They lived somewhere in the city, somewhere beyond Livia's small radius of permitted movement, each family sealing its own wound behind closed doors. But Livia did not forget Sabina. She did not forget Felix. She did not forget Daria's warning, or the clerk's wax tablet, or the sound of metal when the machine shook. She took an old cloak that had belonged to her grandmother, heavy fabric lined on the inside where no one looked, and she began to stitch. At first it was only one name. Sabina. Her fingers shook so badly she pricked herself. A drop of blood stained the thread and the stain felt fitting. Then she stitched another. Marcia. Then another. Tertia. She stitched in red, because red was what the garden used to mark the cold. She would use it to mark the remembered. Years passed. Livia grew older. The city changed its fashions, its scandals, its gossip. The empire pretended it had always been clean. Livia did not pretend. When she was old enough, she opened a small room behind a baker's shop and taught girls to read. Not noble girls, not the daughters of senators, servant girls, kitchen girls, girls who carried water and cleaned floors, and were taught that silence was virtue. Livia taught them letters, names, how to write a word so it could not be taken from them. Some people whispered that she was strange, that she cared too much about servant children, that she had no husband. Livia accepted the whispers as the cost of breathing. One winter afternoon, when the air was sharp and the streets smelled of smoke, a woman stepped into Livia's little schoolroom. She was taller than Livia remembered, her face older, her eyes carrying a familiar fracture. Tertia. Now grown, no longer a child, but not whole either. For a moment they stared at each other, frozen by the distance between then and now. Then Tertia's mouth trembled, and Livia crossed the room and held her, tight, unafraid of being seen. They cried, not because crying healed them, but because crying finally admitted the truth. They would never return to who they had been. They could only become something else. Livia brought out the cloak and placed it in Tertia's hands. Inside, the names were stitched in red. Sabina, Marcia, Tertia, and others Livia had learned later, whispered by survivors who found her in secret. Tertia's fingers traced the thread as if touching a scar. Livia spoke quietly. "We did not vanish," she said. "We still have names, and as long as someone remembers, the machine does not win." Tertia pressed the cloak to her face, and for the first time since the garden, she breathed like she belonged to herself. If only for a moment. This story is not only about the past. It is about how cruelty survives in everyday life. Evil does not always wear a violent face. Sometimes it wears silk, Sometimes it hides behind procedures, traditions, or the excuse of, "This is just how things are." Most harm is not done by monsters alone, but by ordinary people who look away, who stay silent to protect themselves, who tell themselves that speaking up is too dangerous, too inconvenient, too costly. In daily life, the garden still exists wherever someone is humiliated, and others pretend not to see. Where someone is hurt and told to be quiet for the sake of reputation. Where truth is buried because silence feels safer. The lesson is simple, and it is heavy. If you remember, you resist. If you speak, you interrupt the machine. And if you refuse to stay silent, you protect someone you may never meet. You do not need power to do good. You only need courage at the right moment. If this story moved you, if it made you uncomfortable in a way that felt necessary, please support the channel. Like the video to help this story reach more people. Share it with someone who values truth and empathy. Leave a comment with your thoughts or reflections, and subscribe to the channel so these voices are never buried again. Your support helps bring light to stories that were meant to be forgotten. Before we part, let us take a quiet moment. May God bless you with wisdom to recognize injustice, with strength to speak when silence is easier, and with compassion to protect the vulnerable. May He guard your heart from fear, your voice from hesitation, and your conscience from forgetting. If you agree with this prayer, write Amen in the comments, and may peace go with you.